You're listening to Brainwork Framework, a business and marketing podcast, brought to you by Goosehead Insurance. How you doing, Chris?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing wonderful. Thank you very much for asking, sir. How do you know it's the right time to make your business your full-time job? You can kind of speak to this pretty well, too, starting your business while currently employed.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like a lot of people are certainly in that position, and I feel like a lot of people can maybe be a little overwhelmed with that. You know, like, how the hell am I supposed to start a business and work full time? You know, how am I supposed to do that?
Mm-hmm.
When is it the right time to tell your boss, hey, my business is working or my business is going to work. I'm going to go and do that instead of this.
I feel like most people do the latter. They decide, I want to start a business, but I'm only going to do it if I can quit my full-time job. And sometimes you need to do both at the same time. Start that side hustle first, prove that the business model works, and then it can sustain yourself. And then you can think about leaving your job once you have the clients and customers coming in where you can project your growth to replace your income or at least be happy enough with what you can replace. And that's the biggest thing is a lot of people just jump ship at their employer thinking, I'm going to do something with it, so I'm going to start my own business. And then they start to own their own business. And then they realize, oh no, I have no income coming in. All the decisions come down to them. No one's going to motivate them or cut them a paycheck, literally all on you. But I would say if it's a side hustle, once you can start replacing your income or be comfortable with what you're earning, that's the time you want to focus your attention onto your new business.
Right. Now, kind of what you just said not to do, it's exactly what I did. I worked for an insurance agent at a large captive agency. I had plans to go into agency ownership myself.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of got a little expedited in March of last year when everything got shut down and stuff like that. So yeah, we got shut down, and I kind of had to jump into it a little bit quicker than I originally had planned on, but still did it. Spent most of the summer of last year, revamping my commercial space, doing the flooring, painting, fixing patches in the walls, all that crazy stuff, in a giant bathroom. But that had nothing to do with the business. That's just what I had to do. So kind of speaking to that, like, it's almost difficult to get to the point where you're ready to make your business your full-time income, your full-time effort while working 40 hours or more for somebody else. Because where's the time? Especially if you have a family or something like that. You know, there's no time you have to transition from that job to this one. Now, if you're able to if it starts as a side hustle or something like crafting or DJ service or like a service provided thing, I think it works a little bit better than a product sort of thing, especially if you work for a competitor. So both, I guess, there's really no right or wrong way to do it. I mean, there is certainly like the worst way to do it, but it could still work out for some people.
Oh yeah.
So how do you know? When you're working full time, you got a side hustle, you're making a little bit of money. How do you know when to make your business your full-time job? Well, number one, make sure that while you're employed, you're allowed to start a business. Some employment contracts, depending on where you work, I mean, it's within the law for you to start your own business on the side of your current employer. But the employment contract you have with the employer, that can determine limitations that you need to consider. There may be stipulations regarding property rights. Like, say you work for a graphic design firm or something and you start designing your own cartoon or your own logos or something like that. While employed at that graphic design firm, they may actually be able to own any intellectual property because you're employed. You have an employment contract with them. So you go out and you want to start your own business. Well, they technically own all that stuff you just did. Nobody, you wouldn't think that. Like, that's fucked up. Fuck you. This is my stuff. Go do your own stuff. But as an employee, they, as somebody that's still tied to that employment contract, you're subject to their rules and their limitations. So that is number one thing to consider when you're starting your side gig. In my industry, when you leave one job for another, or you terminate an appointment with one carrier to go to another carrier or something like that, a lot of times they just say, okay, go home. There's no 2-week notice. There's nothing. You just go home.
They don't want you there any longer because there's a chance you can start stealing clients.
For sure, that, and you're not going to put in the effort to nurture the prospects and the leads because That takes time, and you're not going to be there for a long time. So you're just wasting everybody else's time and money.
Right.
So for those kind of things, it's just like you really want to make sure you have your ducks in a row before you start telling anybody about it, because you could end up kicking yourself in the butt by being sent home, essentially terminated that right then and there. And then what? You weren't planning on starting your business for another 3 months or something like that. That's the worst thing that could happen.
Right.
And it does happen. Non-compete clauses, those are real. Starting a business that could be considered a competition to your current employer. Make sure, again, in that employment contract, there's no non-compete laws or rules, regulations that you have to abide by that could affect your business either immediately or down the road. So, do you tell your boss that you're looking to start a business? This can be tricky because you're not required to tell anybody anything, but it all depends on your relationship with your boss. Again, going back to the employment contract, if it requires permission from a superior to start your side business, which some can put that in the contract, make sure you get everything in writing. I've read a few articles past and recently before I started my business that stated very openly that telling anybody at your day job about your ambitions can lead to very unwanted results. Case in point, I'm going to go start my own my own insurance agency. Okay, you're going to be a competitor. You're no longer useful to me. Go home.
Mm-hmm. So now you get a 2-week unpaid vacation that you weren't expecting to have.
Yeah, which could be a blessing. It just means you can start doing what you wanted to do a little bit earlier than you thought. But again, if your finances rely heavily on your current employer, that's where you really got to walk that line and decide when is the best time to do it. And I feel like that almost, I don't know, the current state of capitalism, I suppose, makes it a little bit more difficult for most people probably to chase their ambitions and their side hustles and to start their own businesses, because you rely so heavily on your employer to pay your bills, to maybe pay the foundation of this new business. What do you do when you don't have that income coming in anymore?
Mm-hmm. You have to have some money saved up or take out a loan in order to finance yourself. You got to make it happen.
Right. You got to make it happen. Where there's a will, there's a way. It can depend on how your relationship with your boss, no doubt. If your new business is affecting your work currently, then they're going to start looking to replace you, essentially. So you're just kind of biding your time. You start underperforming because you're spending all your time and money and effort and energy on your business. Obviously, you're going to get fired. So keep that in mind. It's really hard to fully participate in your work if your head is already in a new position or on your own business. Like, even if you're leaving one job, go to another, it's kind of hard for that focus.
Right.
Like you started starting a business in a competing industry, then it becomes an issue of intellectual property. Is the stuff you're doing while employed with that company, does that belong to you due to your employment contract, or does that belong to that company?
Right.
That can kick people in the ass, especially if they start putting a lot of time and energy and money into their products or into their concepts, their ideas, but they didn't read their employment contract correctly. So now when they go to launch their business, their former employer takes them to court and sues them because, hey, you did all of that stuff while employed with us. Technically, we own that now.
Right. Right. It's a tough line to walk. You got to be careful. You got to cover all your bases.
Yeah, exactly. So you were employed. You were full-time employed when you started Milwaukee Underground Productions.
Correct.
And you did it was a weekend gig essentially.
That's correct. I realized that the 9-to-5 lifestyle was not going to work for me. Putting in all these hours in for someone else, not making enough money to get by. So I'm like, I need a side hustle. So not only did I start going back to school, I was taking 2 classes. Then I started taking money from what I earned from being employed and putting it into building a business. Started paying for leads and nurturing leads. Started that business. Started on just the weekends and built it up enough to where I felt comfortable saying, screw you, Mr. Employer. I'm going to do things my way. Because at that point, although the income wouldn't replace my current full-time income, it was a great start where I saw the potential that if I continue to build that can replace my full-time income. So I did just DJ side work for probably about 6 months, and then I got another part-time job because I wanted some money coming in now. Now, that one was kind of a two-sided coin there, double-edged sword, because when I started chasing that part-time job and the opportunities that I thought might be there, I I stopped focusing on my business
Mm.
and it stopped growing. And in fact, it actually went down. My side hustle became less of a side hustle
Mm-hmm.
because I lost focus on making that my primary income.
Mm-hmm.
So after wasting a year and a half working for someone else again, I realized, all right, now I really have to put some effort into my business if it's going to be anything full time. And then suddenly the year after and years following, it became an actual full time business. And now I'm making more than I could have ever earned from a single full time job, even two full time jobs. It's replaced that much.
Right.
So you got to try and find that balance of when is it okay to give up that guaranteed income versus if you just work a little bit harder, focus more attention on your business, you may not even need a part-time income to try to supplement what you're making currently. But
Right.
I think it just kind of shows that no matter when you're working a full-time job already and being on call and running special events and going to school and running a business, anyone can do it. There's always enough time. There's always an extra hour or two here or there that you can dedicate to self-improvement. I think that's just my take on my experience and how I went from working for someone to working for myself, and then those obstacles that came through building myself up, try to get to that point.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And your growth has been gradual over 7 years it's been now, which everybody, every business growth is gradual for sure. And yeah, you might be in the position where you're in a full-time thing now, you have an idea, maybe you start landing a couple clients, you start gathering a little bit of interest, and then right then, that's where, like you said, evaluate your process, evaluate where you're at right now. What do you project your income to be if you keep doing right now? Now, what if you doubled your efforts into that business? What do you project your income to be then? And you kind of have to weigh that against the uncertainty of leaving your employer and trying to do it by yourself. It's absolutely a terrifying thing, especially when, millennials grew up being told you have to go to college. And once you go to college, you're supposed to get a 9-to-5 job and do that for the rest of your fucking life until you're too old to do anything with all of the money you saved up. And then there, you're free. Go live the 6 years you get.
That's the American dream.
That's the American dream. That's the American way. That's not the dream. The dream is to find something that you enjoy, you're passionate about, and can make some money off of that. That's the American dream,
That is for me, at least. That's where I've always been motivated, was to not have to work for someone else. And being a business owner, it's not cut out for everyone, because there can be moments of high stress, low stress, working too many hours, feeling like you're not doing enough, but you're doing too much at the same time. Some people are just okay with showing up, punching a clock, and collecting their money and not having to worry about it because there's too much stress, too much to think about, too much uncertainty. And for many people, that's okay, and that's great. But it's not for everyone. And I found that for myself.
Yeah, similar. And I think you can kind of tell those people that are, like you said, absolutely perfectly content showing up 9 to 5, whatever their 8 to 9 hour day is at work, and then living their life outside of that. Some people are absolutely okay with that, and that's great, because if we didn't have those people, there'd be a lot of service industries that we wouldn't have right now. But there are certainly people that you can just tell, like they're not made to have. It's not that they're not made to have structure. It's just that they're not made to follow somebody else's structure, knowing damn well that for every dollar they make, you're getting 15 cents of that. So focus. Why are you starting your business in the first place? Is it because it's something you enjoy doing? And oh shit, I like crocheting purses and I can sell them for $20 a pop. And that's what you do. Maybe you need to build up a little bit of an inventory first before you start taking any sort of leap in entrepreneurial, quitting your full-time job to start doing what you're doing. It definitely has to be thought about. It should not just be jumped into, because then you're going to, like you said, you're going to end up in those positions, those ruts where you're not having any income, not having any leads. You feel like you're doing everything, but nothing is happening. You spend your whole day, you spend 16 hours in a day emailing, calling, walking, driving to places, yet you didn't make $1 that whole day. You'll do that for a whole 2 weeks and still won't make any money. And it happens. It absolutely happens. And really, of course, it depends on the industry you're in. But you got to be prepared for that. You got to be prepared for moments and times of zero income coming in while you're building yourself from nothing, essentially.
Yep, you definitely have to be smart with budgeting because that money is not always going to be consistent or coming in. For me, a lot of my work happens between May and through October. So there's 6 months where I'm making a bunch of money, but then for the following 6 months, I'm not making as much income. So I really have to make sure that I'm smart with my money, not thinking I can spend all of that. Oh, I got it coming in, so I can just keep that going. No, you're going to have to save a large majority of that, not only for taxes at the end, but surviving through the winter, unless
Right.
you're going to create another business or freelance opportunity where you can make income. So I do have some income rolling in, but it's not the 8 to 10 events that we would normally do in a peak
Mm-hmm.
wedding season month. So,
Mm-hmm. And it's not always going to be consistent too. So that's another thing that's kind of prepare for the unpreparable.
mm-hmm,
You know, it's hard to project consistency,
mm-hmm.
and that's probably the most difficult thing about it.
Yeah, absolutely. One way to counterbalance your income or lack of income is to change your spending habits as well. I don't think we really take a good look at our own personal spending habits. And of course, the joke is always, well, if you just stop having the avocado toast in your Starbucks, yada yada yada, then maybe you can get ahead. There is a little bit of truth to that. On one hand, people shouldn't have to work two full-time jobs to barely make rent. There's a big wage gap there. I do recognize that. But on the flip side, there are a lot of people who make a decent living, but because of their spending habits, they are just throwing their money away, not saving any of it. And I guess it depends on what your goals are. Where do you want to be in life? Or can you change some of your spending habits? Try to balance that out.
Yeah, that's probably something to focus on and prioritize before taking the leap. Changing your spending habits. You know, how much minimally do you need to get by, keeping your bills paid, food on the table, whatever you are responsible for financially. How, like, what's the minimum? What's the bottom line that you have? Google what a rundown is. You don't want to be in a position where somebody asks you for a rundown and you look like a jackass.
Right. You're calling your dad, asking him what a rundown is. You're gonna fax him. Dad, can you take a look at this rundown? Don't work too hard on it. It's just a rundown.
By the way, a rundown is a list of all your clients and the amount of money they paid you over the last 12 months. So,
Oh, that kind of rundown.
yeah.
Okay. I see. Okay.
So those are kind of things you do, after you're, or not even after, just to consider before leaving your full-time employment. When you're at that part, definitely it could be your benefit to reach out to either your direct boss or HR department, because that can lead to support that you didn't know would have been there.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, depending on your industry and if you're joining a competitive thing, it probably won't lead to support. But if you're doing something for yourself, then you might end up with support from your current place. Like if you're, I don't know, I'm not very good with this stuff, but say you want to start selling Sensi products or something like that, and you work full time at a bank, but you start selling Sensi, you realize, holy crap, I'm making half of what I'm making selling Sensi products versus at the bank. Imagine if I put 40 hours a week into this,
Mm-hmm.
I'd be making double what I make then.
Right.
So yeah, that's a smart move. You're not joining a competing industry or a competing company. You're doing something for yourself by yourself. So that would probably be one of those times where it'd be an okay concept to, or it'd be an okay idea to reach out to your HR, your boss, just to let them know where your head is at.
Mm-hmm.
You don't want to leave them. You don't want to leave them in a position where, oh my God, they're scrambling to replace you, because that sucks. Just from a personal standpoint, you don't want to do that to a company unless they're dicks. Then whatever.
Sure.
But
When you get let go from a company, do they give you 2 weeks?
fuck no.
I wonder why that's so lopsided.
Mm-hmm.
The expectation is we give them the 2 weeks notice so they can be prepared.
You're absolutely right.
Like, why can't we be prepared to pay our bills and get
Right.
things in order? Oh, you can at will employment. You can just
Mm-hmm.
get rid of me.
And
I
you
guess.
can. You don't have to give a 2 weeks notice. If you don't have to. Your employment contract will flat out, very obviously say at will employment, which means when you're done being willing to work there, you just don't.
Mm-hmm.
And when they're done being willing to employ you, they just won't.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, the 2 week notice thing, if you're joining a competitive company industry, no, you don't give a 2 weeks notice. You just don't. It might suck. You're gonna leave people sort of scrambling again to replace you, leaving things unfinished, but it's not your business anymore. Don't worry about it. Unless it is your business, then we need to worry about it. But we're not there yet. We're still working for somebody else, planning on starting our business, getting those ducks in a row before we take that leap.
Quack.
Quack. Quack, 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 quack. Basically, start your side hustle while you're employed. Don't leave yet, if you can. If it's like a service-based industry or you're manufacturing your own things, make sure your employment contract allows you to do so. Start to gather some interest, start making some sales so that you can project what a whole year of this might look. Based on, if I'm only putting 6 hours into my business a week and I'm making a little bit of money, how much would I be making if I put 40 or 50 or 60 hours into that business?
Mm-hmm.
That's really the basic formula to decide whether or not your concept will work and be profitable in the end. And then once you start going, then you start building, you start getting that ball rolling, the snowball effect happens, and then there's a time where you come to the conclusion that, oh yeah, I can do this. And then you got to figure out, okay, well, how do I go from a small business to a big business? And you can check out our other episode, Big Biz Energy, for that, or we'll talk about it. So you gotta ask yourself just a couple questions. When you're starting, do you tell your boss that you're looking to start a business? Check your employment contract first. How do you know when your business is big enough to leave your job? Well, once you start making sales and you can see some sort of consistent growth, that's when you have to take the time, do some math, project how long you can go without an income just in case. How much money do you have saved up? And how much money do you think you're going to make over the next 6 months, 12 months, 24 months, putting in the amount of effort and time you need to put into it that you're giving to your current employer? So that's really it. Unfortunately, there's no formula. There's no 100% do this and it will work. Everything is different for everybody because everybody has different financial needs that they have every month. If you got a mortgage and car payment and kids, you need more money than somebody who doesn't have those things. So that's how you go from an AppliCANT to an AppliCAN. You heard it here first, folks. Stay frosty.